Hi, 8th grade. Now it's time for me to talk about the revisions step of the writing process once again. Revising your manuscript. Remember, you are writing a manuscript of an interview between you and a historical character. What a manuscript is, technically, is when there is a report on television or the radio, someone types out what exactly, word for word, is said during that report or interview or whatever, so that people can read it, who were not listening at the time, who did not have the internet capability, or weren't listening to the radio or whatever. And it's also for the record kind of thing. So it's sort of a transcribing thing. You imagine that you and this person had this interview. In reality, you didn't, of course, because you can't time travel. Or can you? Anyway. And so then you put out this manuscript as a publication. So that's what it is. Follow all of these steps. Number 1, count the words. If you have fewer than 200, add more and put a 1. I will also add here, if you have more than 250 and some of those words are not needed, you can take out some words here and put a 1. But you should have at least 200 words. If you have enough, make some lines longer or add more lines. In other words, make either you or your interviewee say more, or you could add another question and answer or something like that to add more. Don't repeat things again unless you are trying to be funny. No, don't do that. Just don't repeat things. And put a 1. A little 1 next to a change that you make in that area. Put your word count at the end of your story. I said story, I mean manuscript. You know what I mean, at the bottom. So if you have 239 words, then put 239 at the bottom. Number 2, make sure your interview is in manuscript format with you and your interviewee each speaking at least 5 times. So what's really going to happen is you're going to speak 6 times and your interviewee is going to speak 5 times, most likely. And that you open and close, because you're going to open and close your interview. So you're going to say, hey, this is Juancito, and I am here in 1953 with John F. Kennedy and whatever. Then put a 2 next to a change you make in this category. So if you forgot to do an opening or a closing, you can put a 2 next to that if you add that. If you didn't have you and your interviewee speaking at least 5 times, you would need to add something and put a 2 next to that. If you just have a little bit more that you could add from your pre-writing, then, and if if you already have opening and closing and you already have at least 5 times each, then you could add another question and answer, and that could count for number 2. Number 3, the way you speak should be different from the way your interviewee speaks. Okay, so obviously if I were to go back in time and talk with George Washington wouldn't talk like a 21st century person. He would talk like an 18th century person. Okay, so he would talk differently. Maybe more formal, maybe more Latin-based words than I use. Stuff like that. It should be noticeably different. And if you make a change in this category, put a 3. Number 4, check your word choices, especially prepositions. Remember we talked about prepositions like in, on, at, until, from, of, all these kinds of things. Did you use the right word? It doesn't have to be prepositions, but that's an idea for you, because a lot of you make mistakes in that area. If you make a change in this area, put a 4 by it. You could always change words and make them better, right? If you say something is good, you could say delicious instead of good, or you could say fancy instead of good, or whatever. Number 5, do you have capital letters and periods showing the beginning and end of each sentence in your interview, or a question mark if it's a question. Obviously, you're going to have questions, right? Do you have any run-on sentences that need to be fixed? Do you have sentences that are super duper long? Don't have sentences that are super duper long, especially in an interview. You probably don't need to have sentences that are 6 lines long, for example. If you do, then you might need to break that up. Any of these kinds of changes should be marked with a little number 5. Correct any spelling, grammar, or punctuation errors, and mark one of these corrections with a little number 6. You'll notice that this is 4 points, this assignment. I'm giving you a possibility of having 6 points. You do not need to mark all of a 6 by every single correction that you make in spelling and punctuation and grammar. Only one number 6 would be fine. But if you find all 6 of these, then that's 2 bonus points. And most of you could use all of the bonus points that you can get. And let's see. You only need 4 of these. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the revisions. The final draft, just make sure again that it's in manuscript format. You do not have to skip lines on your final draft. Make it nice so that it can be read. And I think that's pretty much it. Remember to put your final draft in the final draft category, put your revisions in the revisions category, and if you just give me a clean draft for your revisions, that's not revisions. Revisions are where I can see the changes in the little number 1 or the little number 4 or whatever next to the things that we're talking about. Okay? So, if you have any questions, put them in the comments or in WhatsApp. Have a nice day and happy writing.